Hi, Carys here. Gary and I recorded this week's episode before learning the really sad news that Lord Herman Ouseley, the founder of Kick It Out and a real legend, unfortunately passed away. So we wanted to say rest in peace and send our condolences to his family and friends from all of the Over Under team.
Hi, I'm Gary Young.
And I'm Carys Afoko.
Every week, Carys and I will be talking about those stories in the news that are overreported and the ones that are going completely under the radar and not being talked about enough.
This is Over the Top, Under the Radar. So, Gary, did you watch it?
Did I watch what?
Beyonce's done a big advert for Levi's. It's famous, already iconic.
Already iconic? Is that even possible that something could already be iconic?
It is. I mean, just do a Google. It's a remake or a sort of parody of an already iconic Levi's advert.
Were you even conscious for the first Levi's advert?
I didn't actually know. One of our producers told me. She goes into a laundrette with her song Levi's Jeans playing, and she strips off out of her Levi's jeans, so a bit raunchy, puts them in the washing machine, and apparently there's an iconic advert that was already made with a man.
Yeah, there's one, from my childhood with a kind of classic soul track or R&B track where a guy goes in and whips off his trousers, and yes, I remember it well. But I mean, how much money does she need?
It's unclear, but clearly more, I guess, is the answer. I think we've got different politics when it comes to capitalism, would be my guess. But I still love her. But no, I mean, obviously, presumably it was a bit of a fake out, because I guess the other thing you could have been watching is anything from the Tory Party conference, Birmingham.
Well, yeah, that's a trip. I mean, I saw Liz Truss saying weird stuff, and I just thought, if I'd done what you'd done, in as little time as it takes. I don't really like saying this about women in particular, but I'd just crawl under a rock and put sorry on top of the rock and just stay there for a while. Like, just let the lettuce have a go. I mean, there's no...
Do you know what? The thing I find almost impressive about her, Rishi Sunak rocked up, gave a quick speech and disappeared. My girl was acting like she was still leader of the party and breathtakingly claimed that if she had been in charge, the Tories would have won more seats. This is the person who didn't win her own seat, and she is literally, and that's what I respect. I believe the young people call it delulu. And at one point, she claimed that wokeness came from Clement Attlee. I am not making this up. Someone was like, "When did all this, woke, deep state shit begin?" She was like, "I mean Clement Attlee," and you're like, "Yes, Comrade Clement."
I like that idea that she's going to pin it on him, not like black people or gay people or trans people. It's a fucking 60-year-old white guy who gave you the National Health Service. Because, if that's woke, then everyone can get behind woke, right? You like National Health Service. I grew up in a new town. You like your new town. You like your welfare state. It's all woke. It's all the fault of the woke.
Stay woke. That's what he used to say. That was his election slogan. Stay woke.
I think it was "Stay woke, bitches" is what his election slogan was, which was radical for 1945.
Yeah, so I think Liz Truss was a highlight/lowlight of the Birmingham conference. And then, I feel like we need to talk a little bit about Kemi, because she's all over the shop.
I have reached peak Kemi at this point. Obviously, she's showing off.
Do we think that's what it is? So for those who don't know, Kemi Badenoch, one of the 4, I believe there are still 4 leadership candidates, and she gave an interview to Times Radio. It does sound like she's suggesting that statutory maternity pay is too high. She denies this. She's tweeted the sort of retractions, but based on the transcript or the audio of the interview, it seems like she's saying maternity pay is too high. I don't know if they're gaffes, because they are she is saying these things.
They're not gaffes. She's showing off. When you I remember showing off as a child, and then sometimes you go too far. It's like you've gone too far.
Tony Benn used to have a thing about there are politicians who are weather vaned and are blown by the wind, and there are politicians who are signposts. They point one way and they say this is the way. And with Kemi, she backs off it. She won't go full Farage. Like, she says something outrageous, she gets the headlines. And then when journalists like stick a mic in her face, well, you're misinterpreting me. I have 3 children. Of course, I think maternity pay is a good thing.
I mean, I take your point. I think there is a third category. There's a weather vane, there's a signpost, and then there's the whack job. It's not that what she's saying isn't dangerous. It's more to me that the only strategy I can divine from what she's saying is to gain attention. It's not like there is a big constituency out there at the moment saying maternity pay, we've got to cut it. Then she's in a kind of sort of Islamophobe off with Robert Jenrick, who seems to be winning in that kind of regard.
So he gave this wild speech in Birmingham about the European Convention of Human Rights, and he tried to turn it into the new Brexit. He was like, the choice is, are we going to leave or remain? And, you know, immigration is all because of the European, like, he literally pinned, and just listen, this is factually inaccurate. Soldiers have to shoot terrorists because the ECHR would mean that they couldn't question them or detain them. Our immigration can't be controlled because we're a member of the European Convention of Human Rights, which, sidebar, basically everyone in Europe is a member of. It's not like the EU at all. But he used to be like a centrist, from what I can understand. I think he's gone full like alt-right, Trumpy, Farage. I think he's just like, I don't believe any of this shit, but I do believe I should be Prime Minister.
It feels to me like Cleverly and Tugendhat are the saner ones.
I think James Cleverly seems sensible and quite compelling, which is normally a good predictor of the candidate the Tories will not pick.
Sensible? What are you his mum?
Relative, no, but like relative to the
boy.
others, he seems sensible. He does a good media performance. He doesn't claim wild things that aren't true just to get a headline. And for that reason, I hope and believe that the Tories will take one look at him and be like, nah. Because generally, if I think a Tory is palatable, they tend not to be able to win with the membership. I think Cleverly would be a bigger threat to Labour. Tugendhat, I don't know. He's got that name, but I don't really know much about him.
Hey,
he's not
name.
popping for now. I'm not talking shit. I'm just saying the name's the most memorable thing. What else do you know about him? He's in the armed services or something. That's kind of all he's got. A quirky name. I don't know where it's from. I'm sorry, listeners.
He's a moderate, isn't he?
Him and Cleverly are the moderate ones, but I think I could think of some rude analogies, but I think moderation is not abundant with any of them. So we've got some tweets from listeners. One from Amar Patel, reflecting on a good night with Over Under Pod and London Podfest, where Zara Sultana won me over with her commitment to grassroots politics and speaking truth to power. Spare 30 minutes for this pod, incisive chat on key issues, plus a few vibes. I love a lot of things about that tweet, not just the use of vibes, but I thought the conversation with Zara was wonderful, and I really thought politicians can often show up in a quite boring, buttoned up way, and I thought she was really authentic and open and honest. She was really powerful. So if you haven't listened to that episode, definitely go back. It's from a couple of weeks ago.
She's one of those people that makes you feel hopeful. Big shout out to the people who signed up to Patreon. We have 271 incredibly generous paying members, so please support us. Put your money where your ears are and subscribe to our Patreon. This week's new sign-ups are Heather, Linda, Simon, Sanjeev, Julia, Yvonne, Daniel, and Paul. We are grateful to all of you. Thank you so much.
We have 271 generous Patreon supporters, and we are trying to reach 300 by the end of October, which is Black History Month, to help keep the podcast running. Please, if you can, help us reach our target. Sign up to support us on Patreon today. You go to the Patreon website and you search for the podcast, and packages start at as little as £3 a month. And as well as helping to keep the show running, you'll get to access bonus episodes, additional content, and you can be part of the Over Under WhatsApp community. So thank you to everyone supporting. Please support us if you can.
And for those in America or elsewhere, when we say by the end of Black History Month, we mean by the end of October, not by the end of February.
So I want to talk to you about my over-the-top story first. Even if you didn't watch it, I think it won't have passed you by. My over-the-top is the vice presidential debate. Tuesday night, Tim Walz and JD Vance squared up for the first and probably only, in fact, definitely only vice presidential debate, and probably the last TV debate of this election campaign. Just quickly, so 43 million people tuned in, which is down quite a lot. 57 million people tuned in 2020 for the last vice presidential debate between Kamala Harris and Mike Pence. What I think has been over the top about the VP debate, and to a degree, all of the debates, when it comes to big political set piece moments like this, there are sort of three categories of people. There's a category of people who just aren't going to watch the debate, don't care about the debate, maybe don't know it's happening. Then there's the sort of political insiders and political nerds. And I am not a political insider, but I am definitely a political nerd. And the problem is we're watching the debates and consuming media around the debate in a very different way to the third category of people, which are most of the 43 million people tuning in. In terms of the coverage of the debate, you get all the hype beforehand. Everyone's like, debate's coming. It's going to be big. This one's the big one. And, almost like it's a boxing match, like who's going to win? What are they looking like? And then you have the actual debate, which is live streamed and broadcast on loads of channels, and you've got the spin room, and you've got the tweet alongs, and you've got the snap polls, and then you've got the inevitable sort of long tail of post-debate analysis. And so you get all of this content. I'm not convinced it's as important as the amount of airtime that all the commentary give it. And I think the challenge is that third category of person that did tune into the debate watched it in a very different way. So maybe they had it on when there were second screenings. So they had it on the TV, but they were scrolling on their phone or playing Candy Crush. And so you get this huge media moment around something that gives it an artificial sense of importance. And I think if we were really thinking about events in the last week that are potentially going to clinch the election, my pitch would be for Hurricane Helene. We're talking 1.4 million people without power in the South. We're talking 160 dead so far in North and South Carolina, Georgia, Florida, Virginia, Tennessee. It's a moment that Trump is using to politically grandstand. Trump is many things, but he's got this real instinct for retail politics and for TV visuals. So sure, we'll get a few clips of JD Vance and Tim Walz. We'll get maybe some political ads. But what Trump did was he had the MAGA cap on. He was straight into Georgia in the rubble with local pastors, talking to politicians, and, as Trump likes to do, lying. He has said that Biden hasn't been contactable. He set up a GoFundMe, like a MAGA GoFundMe, to help support families. And he claims, which again, I believe is a lie, that thanks to him, Elon Musk's sort of mobile internet, satellite technology, Starlink, is being sent into the affected areas. We're talking about a few swing states here. And I guess my concern is the hurricane is harder to cover and it's not a set piece. But in terms of shaping who you're going to vote for, it feels like a bigger deal. And I think the debate was sort of not that enjoyable theatre. That's why I'm over the debate.
Interesting thing about debates, because the orthodoxy is the debates don't swing much, really. But it was because of Biden's debate that Kamala Harris is now the candidate. But generally, they don't swing much. And I agree with your basic assessment about how it's understood. I can't think of a single vice presidential debate that has changed anything. Two memorable lines I recall from two of the many vice presidential debates that I've seen. One was Lloyd Bentsen in, I think, 1988, saying to Dan Quayle, "I knew John Kennedy, you are no John Kennedy," when Dan Quayle is defending his age and inexperience in becoming a vice presidential candidate. And the other one was Kamala Harris saying to Mike Pence, "I'm talking." But yeah, because North Carolina is a swing state, Georgia is a very marginal state where Trump is still before the law for trying to swing things. Either of those, and Florida, which hasn't swung the Democrats' way for a while, but always could, these are all, central areas. This is a moment when voting has started in some of these places. Campaigning is now difficult. And the issue of the response or the capacity to respond really becomes a national issue. In Kamala Harris's favor is the fact that she is not the president. So if Joe Biden had still been the candidate, then his presence or not in the area would have been a major issue.
I think there's the theatre and the visuals of how Trump is showing up around the hurricane that I think are quite powerful to reinforcing I'm presidential, I get shit done. I'm not saying those things are decisive, but there was just something about seeing him with the MAGA cap in the rubble. And I was like, oh, he's really good at this stuff. Kamala Harris has a lot of strengths, but I don't think she's the kind of person that can manufacture a moment like this. So yeah, it made me think, I was like, I'm a bit more, again, the volume of coverage about the debate, a little bit too much, not enough thinking about the hurricane and how natural disasters will sort of play out, or these moments and what they make people sort of think and feel about the candidates.
My under is the address of the Barbadian Prime Minister, Mia Mottley.
Love her. I love her.
To the UN General Assembly, which was nothing short of incredible and really shook the place up. Her address was about war and peace. She actually kind of, without naming him, which would probably have been undiplomatic, she kind of calls out Netanyahu, who quoted Samuel's, which is a book of the Bible. She says the Bible can't be used as convenient aid when it suits us and rejected when it doesn't. And then she kind of out-Bibles him with a quote from Romans. She talks about Myanmar, Ukraine, the silence, she says, that has engulfed Sudan is unacceptable and may well be rooted in the racism that the world still carries as a badge of honor. But it's in the Middle East where she really shines. She says the state and people of Palestine, human beings, are entitled to a full recognition by integration into and support from the international community. So there are a few things that I want to say. The first is Mia Mottley, who I've had the pleasure of interviewing twice now, once recently, and I'll put the interview in the newsletter. Once more recently while she was Prime Minister, once 25 years ago, when she was, I think, Minister for Youth and Sport or something. Mia Mottley is a badass. Her brilliant speech at COP26 in Glasgow, which brought the house down. This one, which got rounds of applause. Even the introduction, Barbados, which is where my folks are from, which is renowned for its snootiness, actually, not for its badass.
Wait, what?
Barbados
You're renowned for being snooty?
Barbados is, yeah. Bajans are, they call
Bajans
it Little England. Well, in the same way, I'm not saying they are, I'm saying they're renowned for being. So each place has its own reputation. Jamaicans have a reputation for being roughnecks. I'm not saying they are, I'm saying that's their reputation. Trinidadians have a reputation for being kind of limers, for being like party people. Bajans have a reputation for, frankly, being up their own arse, being snooty and precious and, yeah, like looking down their noses at people. That is what they are kind of renowned for in the region. And Mottley, she's a badass. She is confronting that reputation. She's made Barbados a republic, has set up or is setting up embassies in Accra, in Ghana, and in Nairobi. She's leading the way on reparations. She's leading the way on climate change. Even her title, when they call her, kind of makes me laugh because this is a small country. Mia Mottley, Prime Minister, Minister for National Security and the Civil Service, and the Minister for Finance, Economic Affairs and Investment.
She's got a lot of jobs.
She's got a lot of jobs. She's a very busy person. But that speaks to the size of the country. And so really punching above its weight, which brings me on to the second point. So there's Mia Mottley. Then there's the Caribbean, which I do think is, I'm not going to say having its moment in the sun because that would be corny, but it is leading a lot of discussions. I think Barbados is leading the Caribbean to some degree, but the Caribbean is, as a region, I was at the People of African Descent, I don't know if it was a conference or a symposium or what you would call it, in Geneva earlier this year. And it was the Caribbean countries that are really leading discussions about reparations. They are really kind of at the forefront of conversations about the climate change because they're island people. They will be, much more severely affected. Caribbean's having this moment. Haiti was the kind of central discussing point where everybody kind of sort of met in the People of African Descent. Remember this speech says, until Haiti is free, none of us are free. And there's this big roar in Geneva. So the Caribbean is having a moment. And then the third thing I want to say is just how on point she is about what is going on in the Middle East. time prevents us from having a detailed kind of breakdown of this. But the thing that shocked me when Iran started launching its missiles against Israel, which is obviously any missile going anywhere is going in the wrong place, right? The world would be better off if there were no missiles, if there was no war, and so on and so forth. But I'm not a pacifist. And the way that Keir Starmer, for one, but not the only one, said, well, Israel has a right to defend itself. Well, okay. But does that right not then extend to other places? Do other people not have the right to defend themselves? I just thought it was a bizarre formulation when we had seen over the previous 4 or 5 days precisely who the aggressor was, that then we should come back to this thing of like, well, Israel's got the right to defend itself, as though nobody else does.
I think it's really good under the radar. I have not seen the speech. I think the other thing, though, is it's a real reminder, which we've seen time and time again around Gaza and the Middle East, that the conversation that's being had in Western Europe and the United States is not the same conversation that's being had in other countries. I'm thinking about South Africa. I'm thinking about Barbados. I think it is worth remembering that the way things are reported here is not how everyone sees it, and that actually most people and most countries in the world aren't in Western Europe or the United States. So I think it's a failing of our media and its own sort of idiosyncrasies and established realities that we aren't engaging more with how this conflict seems if you're not London or Berlin or New York.
It was ever thus, I think. I feel that we have these conversations in the West, we're both in Britain, or these conversations take place in the British polity. They forget that we have seen what they have done, whether it's Grenada or Iraq. Like, they come onto the stage like they are great moral arbiters, not realizing, apparently, that we've got their number. And it's not a very difficult thing to get because it exists in plain sight. It's stunning.
It's also about courage, isn't it? You know, she doesn't need to say a word about the Middle East, but she understands that we're all connected and that we can't be free until all of us are free. And I think, it just feels like, I think it's pretty shameful if you're one of the silent Western politicians who just copy paste the same press release. Whatever happens, Israel has a right to defend itself. I think she should make some other people feel embarrassed. So my under the radar, and I've wanted to talk about it before on the podcast, and this is basically the last week I can, because it's the last week it's going to be news, is the closure of Blast Furnace 4 at the Port Talbot Steelworks. I've thought a lot about how to talk about steel without getting too nerdy. What do you know about Port Talbot and what do you know about steel?
I know that Port Talbot is in Wales.
Correct.
I know that steel production is way down. The extent to which it exists is mostly globalized actors. So I know a little bit.
Okay, so Port Talbot is in South Wales, very near where my family's from. And it is, like many places in the UK, a town that was defined by one industry. And I guess the reason I wanted to talk about Port Talbot, it hasn't gone completely under the radar. You reliably get 3 or 4 news stories every time there's a development around the closure of the steelworks. And the development this week was that the final blast furnace, so that's the thing that turns iron into steel, has closed. In human terms, that's about 2,500 jobs that will directly be lost in Port Talbot. I feel like there are a couple of really key parts of the story that don't get talked about. And one is the huge subsidy to Tata Steel, which is the company that owns the steelworks in Port Talbot, with very few strings attached. So we're talking about £500 million initially negotiated by Rishi Sunak. There is a lot of misinformation that the steelworks in Port Talbot has closed because of climate change, and that is bullshit. The 500 million that's been given to Tata is in like a desperate attempt to get them to stay in the UK. This is about, and we have the situation we have in so many sectors where you have a company that's not even headquartered or owned in the UK that is only concerned with profits. And India and China produce lots of steel, and arguably Chinese steel has been heavily subsidized. So it's been made cheaper to make it more saleable. So we're not going to stop consuming steel, Gary. We're just going to start importing it. Port Talbot's story is the story of so many towns and communities in the UK that were the heart of manufacturing, were the heart of really good jobs that you didn't have to have a degree to have. And I don't want to romanticize steel and coal. Relative to coal mining, steel jobs were pretty good jobs from what, my Welsh family say, a bit less dangerous, but still well paid. And across the UK, as those industries have declined, sometimes as a result of politicians' decisions, Thatcher didn't believe that we should have these incredibly unionized manufacturing jobs. She thought we should become a hub for financial services and banking. Respectfully disagree, but we are where we are. So these jobs get hollowed out. These communities and towns that sprung up, in the 19th and 20th century around this industry are then left with a bunch of people who are unemployed and skilled for a sector where there aren't jobs, with loads of other people who don't work at the steelworks or in the coal mine. And then, I think it feels like the bigger thing that we should be talking about and that we all know is the world has changed a lot since the Industrial Revolution. And if we leave it to markets to decide what jobs exist in communities like Port Talbot, those won't be good jobs.
I agree with you. It's the decline that is not inevitable. The decline is avoidable. The shift might be necessary. It might be that we have to move out of, or an area has to move out of one industry and into another. I mean, whatever the economy is, whether it's capitalist or socialist or whatever, that not all industries last forever, not all needs last forever. What's wrong is the sense that there goes Port Talbot. That's going to be one of those towns now, as opposed to right, we can see this coming. This decline is not new. It's been going on for a while. How are we going to transform so that there are other kinds of jobs? The idea of kind of economic change doesn't scare me.
I actually think it's worse than that though, Gary, because we get a lot of chat about benefits claimants. Too many people are on disability. Too many people are on sick. Thatcher encouraged people to go onto some of these benefits to keep unemployment numbers lower. But we talk a lot about benefits, but the biggest benefit scroungers are these companies. We privatized industries. They made a killing in taking over them. They don't invest in infrastructure or jobs or things that we care about. And then they're cap in hand for another handout. Oh, low carbon. Now we'll need some money for that. We're giving them £500 billion and they're putting in 750 million for this sort of green steel, next generation project. I'm sorry. I don't think that's value for money. So our economy is set up really well to give massive handouts to corporates with no strings attached. And so then we're kind of desperately being oh, Tata, please stay in the UK. And they're oh, I don't know, could you give us some more money? It's probably not enough. All these future funds, it's not going to help any of the workers today. And I think that, that sense that it's just, we're not really set up to think about people. I'm not clear. There are lots of different views about whether we should be sustainably still producing steel in the UK. But it is clear that we will still be consuming and needing steel. And it is very likely that the price of steel, if we import it from India and China, will be cheap. But the climate impacts of shipping steel, of producing the steel, are going to be high. So again, there's all this stuff we care about that isn't priced in. And the only bit that seems to work smoothly is whatever big company bought an important part of infrastructure in a fire sale is going to keep getting paid. The people who seem best positioned to benefit from things like this are the Reforms and the Nigel Farage, because they're there and they've got their story and they're ready to jump on it. And I don't know that we on the left have really got anything developed other than a kind of, we object to this, it shouldn't be happening. And that feels sad and a wasted opportunity.
It's a cartoon, 20 cookies. Corporation takes 19, leaves one, and then says to the kind of white working class person, hey, that asylum seeker is going to take your cookie. It's well, you got another 19 there, dude. Why don't you share? The framing of it is egregious. Blame it on climate is the immediate one. Blame it on the climate and blame it on the hippies. Blame it on anybody who wants a better world. When actually what this will do is make the world worse down the line. The minority of the week, the hate figure of the week, will be blamed for the hollowing out of those communities.
Yeah, I think the only final thing I want to say, and why, you may not be from Port Talbot or ever, even drive past it, is that this story is the story of huge parts of the UK, towns and cities and areas that their wealth and their economy was powered by an industry that it's gone. And it filters through to everything, like the lack of buses, the lack of transport infrastructure, slower internet. So there are whole areas who are set up to fail. And it actually isn't Tata Steel's job. It is government's job to worry less about big corporations giving them handouts, making them stay, and more thinking about how do you set people in Port Talbot up for success so that you don't have the same story across the country or across the nations of the UK, where the only way to succeed or thrive or make money is to leave and to come to the few big cities in the UK where there is infrastructure and there are jobs, and then exacerbating this divide. So that's my under. And if anyone's listening from Port Talbot and is affected by this, just, really, really sorry, and really sending you lots of thoughts and solidarity.
My over is Black History Month. Here we are. We're in October.
You're over Black History Month?
Yeah. Well, no. It's not that I'm over Black History Month. It's that it's an over the top. I am a little bit over Black History Month, though, and I will come to that. But it is Black History Month. That's the first thing. There are other countries, America in particular, but other countries where Black History Month is in February or elsewhere in Britain, and some other parts of Europe it's in October. Don't ask me why. But October is a longer month than February, so we get more Black history. The reason was a few things. I'm ambivalent about Black History Month as a concept. We shouldn't need it. All history, arguably, should be told. We shouldn't have to have a month called Black History Month where we remind people of the contributions that have been made and elements of Black history that have been discarded. But because they have, we do need it. It's in the same way we shouldn't need affirmative action. There's a bunch of things that we shouldn't need, but because of racism, we do need it. And particularly this bloody country. It does such a good job of forgetting. I'm also ambivalent because some inspired stuff comes out of Black History Month. There are moments where, budgets are set aside for it. People think they need a plan for it. So some cool stuff happens, but it's also lazy. So people think, we'll just do it in Black History Month. Or the number of invites I get, Gary, it's Black History Month. We'd like you to come and speak. What about? Anything, really? Well, no.
Just come and be black.
Really, yeah.
Just come and black it up.
Just black it, baby. We just want a black attack, and it's like, no, come on, give it some thought.
You're like, come in November. They're like, no, not for November. It needs to be October.
A bit too black for November. Sorry, a bit too dark for November. I'm also ambivalent because of the kind of corporate buy-in. KFC supports Black history. It's like, well, how?
But have we really got to that yet? I feel like we haven't got that in the UK yet. I want my free shit. I feel like Pride has been called. Have we got that? Have we got it? Has KFC supported?
Yeah, but anyway, you know it's coming. I think we have, but certainly in America they do. And it's sort of like, I'm waiting for the kind of Ku Klux Klan supports Black History Month. It's like, well, what does this mean to you? What are you talking about? And what the fuck has our history got to do with Kentucky Fried Chicken?
Yeah, I'm with you, but I actually think in America it's bigger and has been more co-opted. But here I think it's not big enough to be co-opted yet. Like in America, if you consume, I know Black History Month is in February in America because I've worked for American companies and I consume American media. But I think we could get a bit more. I think we could do a bit more co-option in ours. I still think it's not a big enough deal.
Well,
I think it's a school project and a Gary speaking tour project, but we're not. I don't think we're doing enough.
It's a bit. I think it's more than that. I'd be interested to know what listeners think. I think certainly like Tesco's celebrate Black History Month, Sainsbury's celebrate Black History Month, Aldi I think celebrates Black History Month in Britain. So it's kind of it is a thing that corporates have their eyes on. I mean, it's never going to be on the scale of America, but it is a thing.
Yeah, and I guess that bothers me a bit less maybe in a few years' time when I'm, Aldi have rebranded all of their milk with the names of different Black heroes, I'll feel that it's a little bit more crass. But yeah, generally I feel like more noise is better. And yeah, for big employers to acknowledge that there are Black people in their staff and in their history, I feel like it's a good thing. But I do hear you occasionally, it can be pretty jarring.
The second main thing is the kind of the way that it's told. And this then speaks to the third. The stories in Black History Month always come out in a passive voice. You know, Rosa Parks was kicked off a bus. Martin Luther King was assassinated. She didn't kick herself off the bus. He didn't assassinate himself. People were enslaved. There's always the objects, but never the subjects. And that, you know, if there's a Black History Month, it is bare imagining what a White History Month would look like. Because Black history is not a subgenre of history. It's history. We have this month where white people don't feature. And so it becomes like these things that just happened. And it reminds me of a tour that my partner did of a slave plantation where they kept saying like, and the food would come in here and then the people would, you know, be served their drinks here. And it's like, who was doing this?
And the people were whipped.
Yeah. The people
Slaves were whipped.
Like, by whom? You know, so that is the second thing. And the third, which relates to that, is that what I find us doing quite a lot in Black History Month is all the heavy lifting. So it's not just a celebration of Black history. It's also a moment where Black people have to tell white people their history. Like, yes, this happened in this town or in this country or in this place. This is what happened. So we have to not just talk about ourselves. We have to talk about everything. It's too much heavy lifting. It's exhausting.
I agree with the second bit. I'm not sure about the first bit. I would love to live in a world where we didn't need Black History Month. I think that in the world that we do live in, we need to carve out space and time to celebrate Black people and Black history. I don't think it should be confined to a month, but I think that in the world we live in, where we are told subtly and unsubtly every day that Black people are lesser, are criminal, are stupid, are, are disadvantaged because of some failing rather than structures and systems that commoditized us, tortured us, raped us systematically. Like, I think having a month where we try to celebrate people is important, just like I think Pride Month's important. I think we need it.
Oh, yeah. But I said we shouldn't need it, but we do. I said we shouldn't need it, but we do.
But I don't think I would love to be in a position where Black history, where I'm like, oh my God, Black History Month, I'm so sick. I don't think we have enough yet. I think that we still need that space and time carved out. And I think that there's a real problem in how history is like taught and consumed in this country. All we hear about is like Winston Churchill and Henry VIII. No one knows probably who Olive Morris is, other than maybe some of our listeners, or Sojourner Truth. Sojourner Truth is an African-American activist who gave a very famous speech called Ain't I a Woman, that is arguably one of the early examples of intersectional feminism. She shows up at a suffrage meeting, white American women talking about why they should have the vote. Definitely worth Googling and reading the speech. I won't try and paraphrase it here. Olive Morris was an amazing South London community activist in the UK who died very young, like I think at the end of the 70s, and was really involved in the Brixton Black Women's Group and lots of like socialist, feminist activism in the community of South London, which is probably why I know who she is. And I think that because of how dominant African-American culture can be in the Black diaspora, I guess that's why I feel particularly sort of protective over and supportive of Black British History Month. I think it's probably a good thing it's in a different month, just because I think we do get a lot of African-American stories and they are wonderful. And also we have our own sort of stories. It would be good for more people to know them. Thank you for listening to Over the Top, Under the Radar. If you like it, please remember to like and subscribe and leave a review wherever you get your podcasts. It makes a difference.
Sign up to our newsletter at overunderpod.com.
And if you are able to support the show, you can find us by searching Over the Top, Under the Radar on Patreon and make a regular gift.
And connect with us on socials at over_under_pod_. Thanks so much for listening.